You know, for starters, and being here about 5 minutes, that's not a bad smallmouth. You kind of got it in a little bit of water. And the first tournament that I won was a smallmouth bass tournament. I think it's actually a brine, so it's got a little bit of salt to it. Nice smallmouth. I haven't really tasted these or put them in my mouth yet.
Canadian Sport Fishing is brought to you by Rapala Premium Fishing Gear, crafted from experience. Yamaha on the water. This is my Yamaha. What kind of Yamaha are you? Dickies, a legend in work since 1922. Lucky Strike. More fish fight with a Lucky Strike.
You know, there's just something about starting out early in the morning and wondering if the fish are going to be where you hope they're going to be. So I just had a very nice, enjoyable ride out on Lake Erie. And what I'm going to do here is just get set up with my electronics. I'm actually using a special kind of a bait. I'm going to be using probably the closest thing to using live bait. And I'm going to put a bright color because it's early in the day. I'm going to be using a pink color, and this particular one is a 3-inch long grub. Okay, and I'm going to tell you all about that a little bit later. And all I'm doing is I'm taking this grub that looks kind of like a leech, and I'm putting it on my jig head just like that. So this is a finesse fishing presentation. I'm using a very short rod. This is a 6-foot rod. You can see it's very flexible. And I'm using 1 pound diameter monofilament line. It's actually a titanium braid, and it's 6 or 8 pound test. I'm not sure which one I loaded on this particular rod, but it's for very finesse fishing. So all I'm going to do here, I'm going to work my way in, and I've got an electric so that even if it blows up, I can keep myself within that range. I want to cast about 5 feet of water and work my jigs down off the drop at about 10-12 feet. That's where most of the fish are going to be. You know, this amazes me that you can fish these areas. This fish just made 2 jumps. I'm trying to get him around so you can get a good look at him. It amazes me that there are such good spots to fish where they're really close to urban areas or in urban areas, and very few people will actually take the time to fish them. Like I said earlier, I have a couple of friends that fish right in Hamilton Bay. I mean, lots of people fish the weed beds and so on, but a lot of people don't fish the real industrial areas. You can see how clear this water here. One of the reasons why I'm using the very light line with a fluorocarbon leader. We probably have about 15 to 20 feet of visibility, and we don't even have the sun out yet. So you can see how clear the water is in that little jig head just on the side of this fish's mouth. Now this particular fish threw that bait that I'm using, the Slimers, when I set the hook, because I set the hook really hard, and that's okay. I just got to be gentle with this light line. You can see I've got a little swivel about 1.5 feet up the line. That's where my connection is to my fluorocarbon leader. Look at how nice and quiet that fish is being. You know, for starters, and being here about 5 minutes, that's not a bad smallmouth to start off with. I'm guessing that he's about 17, 18 inches. And you know what? He just inhaled that bait. So I got to get my pliers. I'm using a 1/8 ounce jig because even though I'm working a fast dropping slope, I want it to drop very slowly, and I'll show you the action in just a minute when I rig up my next Slimer. I'm going to get that out. I'm going to take a quick measurement on my handy dandy tape just to see if he is about 17, 18 inches. You know what? He's 18 inches. Isn't that a beautiful smallmouth? Look at how healthy they are feeding on those bait fish. Just going to extend him out into the water. I like how calm he stays in this basket net. What an amazing tool. Now watch, even without the sun, see if you can't follow them. They've got so much energy, they just shoot right down. Now let me show you the way I'm rigging this bait on this very light jig head. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I've got a swivel here with a fluorocarbon leader and then a 1/8 ounce jig head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take my Slimers, and this particular one is 3 inches long, and I've got different colors. I'll even show you some crayfish ones later, but right now, because it's so overcast, I'm going to use this pink because I know it's productive. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Now I've got to stress to you that there are a lot of baits on the market that are made out of plastic and they're biodegradable. A lot of them are scent impregnated, and I'm sure you've used lots. If you were to put this in an aquarium, and I've seen this demonstrated at different sports shows, it would disintegrate in about 2 or 3 days to nothing. Okay, so I don't know how they make it, but if you felt this, it feels just like flesh, just like skin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook it at the wide end, the flat end, not at the end that's got the little curly tail, and I'm going to hook it twice. You ready for this? You ready for this? Look at that action. All I'm doing is moving it very gently. I don't know of any artificial bait that has that lifelike. If I retrieve it quicker, look it, I'm letting it drop. You can imagine that tantalizing action when I retrieve it back to me. Look it, looks just like a leech kicking and so on. You can use it with any size of jig head, but this early in the morning, this finesse fishing presentation with the 8 ounce works extremely well. Now let's see if we can get another fish on. What I'm actually doing with my sunglasses is I'm sighting where it goes from light color to dark because the break is so fast. I'm trying to fish that 5 to 12 feet of water because it drops off so fast. It's like 20-30 feet over on the right in the channel. So even if I'm not seeing boulders and stuff, I'm just trying to fish that actual edge. So you can see I'm kind of casting not quite 45 degrees, but I'm trying to cover the water, come off on an angle. Instead of casting from the deep water to shore, you know, or casting right along the shore where it's really shallow, I'm actually trying to cover this break that goes down to about 15 feet. And because of this color of the Slimers that I'm using, I can actually see it until it disappears down, you know, at that 10 or 12 foot depth. So the water is very clear here. So I'm trying to cast always ahead of me too, as opposed to fishing under the boat. Because I've seen some fish that, there's one. Good hook set with that light line. See, sometimes you don't have to even really work this particular lure because it's so effective, even when it's just sinking. That fish caught me by surprise. I went to lift it and it was just there, and there goes my Slimers. One fish, one Slimers. But you know what? It's okay. It just works so good. Look at how healthy these smallmouth are. They're like little wolves feeding along this bank. Gorgeous fish. I think I'm going to use the net for this guy. I'm guessing he's 16 or 17 inches. Very plump. You can see how thick they are. Small head. See if you want one more jump. Small head and big fat body. Gorgeous fish. You know, this is probably one of my favorite fish to fish in Canada in fresh water. I remember the first bass tournament that I won, you know, and going back in the old days, when I say the old days, in the 80s, I used to fish in bass tournaments right across North America, right down to, you know, as far as Georgia in the US. And the first tournament that I won was a smallmouth bass tournament. Look at how thick that fish is. Isn't he plump? You know he's been feeding well. They're so beautiful. I love that they're schooling fish, so when you find them, even here, like feeding along a shoreline, I'm sure they're all part of one school, and I love the way they fight. They are so strong. They really put up a battle, especially on light line like this. Okay, I'm just going to release it, and you'll see in this clear water that even though it's clear, we're not going to be able to see it. Let's see them go down. Look at, like a bullet, straight down. So there's the pink 3-inch Slimers. And you can see that it comes in a really nice bottle. You know, I do a lot of steelhead fishing, and when I'm done using the bottles for the Slimers, I'm actually going to use this for a roe. or you can use it for other kinds of bait. But you can see they've kind of got it in a little bit of water. I think it's actually a brine, so it's got a little bit of salt to it. I haven't really tasted these or put them in my mouth yet. And they're very supple. Like I say, it's almost like flesh. Okay, so this time I'm just going to hook it once. Look, isn't that gorgeous? 3 inches. It's even got ripples like flesh, you know.
Fishing World! Adventures in your own backyard!
Now kids, look, isn't this neat? This is where some spring water is coming into the small lake. And see the big rocks that are here? The big rocks aren't just out of the water, they're also in the water. See that huge rock? There's that float sitting on top of the weed. See the big boulder that's in the water? In fishing, we call that structure. Structure is something that's a little bit different, like these rocks, where the water changes depth very quickly. See, if you look at the rest of the shoreline, you could walk in off the shoreline and the water would gradually get deeper. But here, if you were to slip in off this rock, it's probably about 3 or 4 feet deep. So places like this, where the water changes depth very quickly, we call structure, is very good to find a concentration of fish. So if you're picking a spot, for example, on the shoreline, and you look down the shoreline, these are the only big rocks and boulders. And it would be a good spot to try fishing for a variety of fish. You might even catch a big one, this big.
Closed captioning of this program is brought to you by Slimers Inorganic Flesh Bait. Fish hit hard and often with Slimers.
Okay, good sized fish. What I've done, just to change it up, and I lost it, so I can't show you, the fish just threw it. I put on a purple crayfish, and I'll show you how to rig it in just a moment. And I was working this bank real tight, because you see the big boulders that go right into the water? I figured, you know, a crayfish imitation for this early, right tight to the bank, would probably be productive. And guess what? Nice smallmouth again. Now we're just twitching it along the bottom. I don't know if he's got any more jumps left. They usually jump right off the bat and shake their head so violently that they throw those Slimers off. You know, if you were walleye fishing, I don't think you'd have the same problem, because walleyes don't fight anywhere near as much as bass. Look at that beautiful bass. Now you'll notice that the shape of the jig head that I'm using is a little bit different, and I'm going to explain to you what I did in just a moment. It's a beautiful trophy smallmouth. To get on light line like this, now let me show you how I rigged this crayfish, because it's kind of neat. I'm going to cut my line. Because I'm using light line, I'm using my teeth, but really you shouldn't. What I've done here, I'll talk about the jig head. This was an oval shaped jig head. I took my pliers and I squished it down so that it would be flat. Okay, so you can see that it's flat. It's only 1/8 ounce, and you can see that it has an offset 60-degree eye, so that when I pull it, it'll just swim across the bottom. Now watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to take my little knife out. This is a bit of a process, but it's worth it when you catch bass like that are 17 to 18 inches. I've got my knife ready here. I'm going to pull out one of these craws, and you know, purple is a great color to use for bass fishing. So these are 5" by 2.5 inches wide, okay? So here's the crayfish right here, the way it comes from Slimers. And I'll tell you, it is hard to hold on to. You can see they even have a little flap at the end. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to pierce a tiny hole, because remember I said that they've got like a gauze material in the center so that it stays on your hook. What I've done is I pierced the hole so the eye of the jig sticks out, and then I'm going to take the front of the hook and I'm going to pierce it right through the body. See right there? I'm just going to push it in. Okay, so my Slimers is going to stay on there really well, and it's almost weedless, to be honest with you, even though I'm fishing it on a rock bottom. Just sliding it on there. Now I'm going to take my line and I'm going to use my favorite knot. If I didn't want to cut my line every time, I could use one of my favorite locking snaps. So right now I'm wrapping it around 4 or 5 times, putting it back through the center. This is one of my favorite knots here. It tastes slimy too. Okay, I'm going to trim my tag off. So these pliers are kind of handy, or pliers, little knife, because they've got little scissors as well. So I'm going to trim my tag, and I will show you the action of this crayfish in the water here. Because the weight is flat, you'll see that it drops evenly. I'm going to try to bring it up. Do you see the action? The way those little arms kick? I'll try to hold it just below the surface. Look at that action. I'm going to cast it out again and just swim it for you. Does that look like it's alive? I wouldn't be surprised if a fish came right here and smacked it. This is the 5-inch crayfish, and I'm going to see if I can get another fish to hit. Now look at that. Doesn't that look slimy? What a great bait. Man, when fishermen get onto this, they're going to be catching a lot more fish. Okay, let me work this bank again. Oh, good take. Gorgeous. He came out of the deeper water. You know, that dark green abyss. I call it an abyss because you can't see anything down there. It's right off the break. Isn't this awesome? Look at. Is he gonna? You can actually see when we say that it's flesh bait. You could see all the little white pieces just from the fish shaking his head that's coming off it. How biodegradable it is. What a nice smallmouth. Love to see them fight like that in this clear water. Look at, gorgeous. Trying to dive down to that 15, 20 foot mark. Come on. Man, talk about energy. Look at, on this little rod too, look at, this rod is 4 feet 9 inches. You can see the specks right here. And it's rated from 1/8 to 1/2 ounce lure size. So you can see how short it is. And there's that blue line. They call this the titanium ice line because it's specially designed for ice fishing, that blue color, but it works so well for finesse fishing. And I'm going to try to net this guy before he throws that Slimers. Beautiful. Look at that. And I just get him over the side. This net is ideal. Look at how nice and calm he's staying. I'll grab it from this side so you can see that strip. Now that strip is 4.5 inches long, and you can see just from the fish head shaking that a lot of it has come off. It's still fine to use to catch another fish on it. And he was hooked very nicely just through the maxillary. You know, one thing I find is using small hooks like I am today. This is a 1/8 ounce jig. You get such good hook sets because the barb is so tiny. Now that almost fell off, but you can see how tiny that barb is. And by the way, there's part of the grub barb there. This jig is made out of bismuth. It's not lead, so it's a little bit more brittle. So you can see that it actually broke away there. That's part of it, but it still works great. Nice smallmouth. Man, this is such easy fishing, and you can do it all day long, even when the sun comes out. Okay, I'm just gonna get him back into the water. All right, we drifted in close to the shoreline here. Look at, what a gorgeous smallmouth. Isn't that a beautiful sight? Beautiful fish, and look at, he's right there, right under the boat to the deep water. Wow. Beautiful fish. Look at it flying all over the surface. You can see the nice man-made structure, the steel piles that are here. I've actually fished in the St. Lawrence where one of the patterns was fishing all these big piles that the ferries dock themselves on to pick up the people. Beautiful smallmouth. Trying to go around that thing, but you know what, even with the slight line I can steer them out, which is a good thing. They've got so much staying power. Look at this gorgeous smallmouth. Just trying to control the boat away from that. I don't want to leave any of my aluminum on there. I'm going to get him in the net here. Come on, there. Nice and gentle. You notice that I'm not ripping the net in and lifting the fish real fast. That's because I don't need to. Because of this basket net, the live release one, it's ideal. You can see how shallow it is. And it's got a nice square handle, very strong handle. This one is 48 inches long. So it's very easy to net the fish. You don't have to really be too fast about it. Now this is probably the third fish that I've caught on this particular Slimer that I'm using, and it's good because I'm going to be able to show you that material that they use to reinforce it so that it doesn't come off the hook. Doesn't come off the hook normally unless the fish really thrashes hard, like smallmouth are known to do. This guy's just hooked around the maxillary. So I'm going to have to use my pliers. You know, it's always good to have all your tools ready. And in the last two boats that I've had, look at that, isn't that a gorgeous smallmouth? Beautiful colors. In the last two boats that I've had all my tools out so that they're easy to get at. Just going to extend it out, let him revive for a second. You can see that he's got all his colors. He doesn't have a lot of stress marks. That means that he's ready to go. He's trying to figure out which way to go, and he's going to take off pretty quick. There he goes. Now let me show you the material that they use for the Slimers to reinforce it. I'm going to try to actually peel some of the material back. So I've got some of it off here. I'm going to throw it in the water. See that material? It's almost like gauze that's there. That's what keeps the Slimers onto your hook. And you can see my hook here. It's kind of hard. If I tear it, pull it really hard, it comes off. But otherwise, it stays on. You can see how it's almost disintegrating in my hand. Kind of snotty looking, if you will.
Canadian Sport Fishing has been brought to you by Rapala Premium Fishing Gear, crafted from experience. Yamaha on the water. This is my Yamaha. What kind of Yamaha are you? Dickies, a legend in work since 1922. Lucky Strike. More fish fight with a Lucky Strike.
You know, trying to locate fish is a lot easier if you have the use of a sonar. Now, on this particular boat, the 185 FG3, I have a smaller unit. I've done something a little bit different. Normally I have the biggest unit here, but I've got the smaller unit here. This is a 797 C2I. So this unit is the one that I use when I'm actually looking for spots, like in the channels, to see if the fish are there. Then when I start fishing, I deploy the electric because I want to have total boat control. I release the electric down, and then I turn on my larger unit, which is an 1197C. Almost looks like a 42-inch flat screen. You know, it's kind of nice because everything's big. When you get my age, over 50, you want big pictures. You want to be able to read everything. It really helps you to control the boat and see that there are fish down there so you can catch more.